Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Thriving in Private Practice During the Pandemic, with Tamara Plankers. My name is Nicole Cast, and I'm the CE Program Manager for the MVMA. And as many of you already know, my role is to moderate the Q&A. A quick review to help you navigate the webinar functions. Please note that depending on the type of device you're on, you do have the opportunity to minimize the various boxes, making the slides larger. And note that the Q&A icon is where you should submit your questions at any point during the session. If you're not able to find those icons, hover your cursor over the bottom of your screen and it should appear for you. I'm delighted to welcome today's speaker representing the MVMA industry partner, Wells Fargo. Tamara has more than 2 decades of experience in consulting and training. She's an authority on understanding and managing cash flow and has a strong record of coaching practices to profitability. She's a certified executive coach, a member of the Academy of Dental Management Consultants, the National Society of Certified Healthcare Business Consultants, and a graduate of Purdue University's Veterinary Management Institute. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And I want to just give a shout out to all my friends and family in Minnesota. And I understand that you are having better weather than I am today. And I'm in Northern California, just outside of San Francisco. So I find that fantastic and ironic. And I've been looking forward to speaking with you. It's a pleasure to be with you here today. Thank you so much for giving up an hour of your day. And what I want to share with you today are lessons that I'm learning during this pandemic. I head up a small team of consultants here at Wells Fargo, and we typically assist new practice owners. So some of our clients are starting new hospitals, others are acquiring existing practices. My goal today is to help you identify some strategies for your own practice, to give you some tangible action items to implement. And I also want to share with you some things maybe to avoid or to manage more astutely. There's certainly been plenty of hurdles that this pandemic has brought about. So for the next hour or so, I want to share with you what I'm hearing from my clients. Just trying to get this to move forward. Here we go. So we have some opportunities. As many of you know, our veterinary industry has experienced a lot of positive growth in the last year. We're going to take a look at that, and we're going to also talk about ways that you can grow your business. Now, there's also challenges. We've got some hurdles that people are facing. Some of you are feeling overwhelmed or burned out. Some of you are having issues with your team. And then finally, we're going to open it up for questions and discussion. So the opportunities, the good news is that there's a lot of good news. We've had a terrific amount of industry growth. One of the best news with the pandemic is that, as you all know, veterinary hospitals were deemed essential. So along with other industries like grocery and hardware stores, we were deemed essential. We did not really have to close, or if we did have to close, it was only partially or for a limited period of time. And you know, as a result also of the pandemic, we've got pet adoptions that have gone way up. So many people working from home. There's been a huge spike in adoptions, as you know. A lot of my friends said, hey, this is a great time for us to add another member to our family or to go ahead and train a puppy. And, you know, maybe because I live alone, or if someone does live alone, they might have seen that this was a great time for them to get a pet just to help offset some of the loneliness. Discretionary spending is also limited. You know, with some other businesses that are closed and travel being restricted, people are spending money elsewhere. Home improvement, victory gardens, and in some cases, better health care for their companion animal family members. one of the interesting things that I've seen is that this graph here from IBIS World shows that the veterinary industry for the last 10 years has had some continual positive news, typically growing about 2 to 3%. And in 2020, it grew by 8% and is projected to continue to grow this year. So for all of you that are wondering, is this a good time to stay in the industry? Is this a good time for my son or daughter to go into vet school? I would say absolutely. There is terrific projections, positive growth being anticipated for our industry. So I want to tell you about a couple of real examples of, and one of the questions I get is that, is this a good time to start a business during a pandemic? And certainly for some people, it's been a terrific time to start a business, even during this challenging time. So here's a 2-doctor practice in Northern California, just outside of San Francisco. And they opened last summer. Their first month was July, and they're in the middle of a global crisis, and it's a fairly saturated market. And they still had this exceptional result. So one of the things I do is I help doctors in their first year by teaching them how to monitor the statistics in their business so that they can make more informed and better decisions about their practice. So this is a sample spreadsheet from our milestone program. So this 2-doctor practice, is averaging for their first 6 months, around $165,000 in production and revenues per month. Huge, much stronger than one might expect, especially again in a fairly saturated market with some of the other hurdles that they could be experiencing. So I look at what are they doing? What's so exceptional about them? And one of the things for a startup, as you probably all can imagine, is that new client flow is essential. So for the average practice, they might, you might be seeing somewhere between 25 and 50 new clients per month. But for a startup, since everyone is a new client, you certainly want to see at least 40 to 50 new clients per month. So one of the things I noticed right away is that these two they had discovered a way to attract and market themselves and really gain a lot of market share. One of the things that they did is that they both had worked in the area for a handful of years. And I noticed that with that, they had a bit of a loyal following, probably like some of you. You've got clients that maybe have followed you. If you're someone who isn't in an established location right now, people that will follow you around because they have that connection with you, they have that strong relationship. So they also launched a social media campaign, and they had a website, and both of these things were up and running, I would say 45 to 60 days before they actually started accepting appointments. One of the things that I noticed on their website is that it's up to date, it's current. It lets me know that it's up to date because there was something on it recently about, St. Patrick's Day coming up, or springtime things, education about things that are happening in their area in the month of March. Other thing that I found very interesting is that they have their COVID protocols right on the front, as you open up the app. And they offer same-day appointments. Now, I know some of you are thinking, we could never do that. And I'm sure that this office can get crazy busy. But what they're doing is they are letting the message get out there and be known that they are open, that they are customer friendly, that they want to see you and your pets. And they're removing some of the barriers right away that I have heard amongst friends and colleagues that say, gee, the veterinary business is so busy right now. Or some of the social media posts that I'll see that people will say, I can't get in to see my veterinarian. They're just booked out months in ahead, in advance. And I love that these two are saying, we're going to strategize and staff and find a way to see and triage those patients so that we can see some same-day appointments and put the message out there that we're here and we're available. The other thing that you will find with them is that you can book an appointment from their website. And, again, one of the things that I want you to think about is your own website right now. What does your website say about you and about your practice? And has it been updated? And when's the last time it was updated? I found myself working, last year with a lot of clients on their marketing and on their messaging regarding the pandemic. And one of the things that I found is that people were very reluctant to put out multiple messages, didn't want to feel like they were bothering their clients, for example, by sending out an email blast again, letting people know what the protocols are for the office, or that they're open, thought that they might be bothering people. And I would say you really need to let go of that and get out of your own way and really keep in touch with your clients. If you want your business to continue to grow, people need to feel connected, and they also need to know what are the new protocols. Is there a new way that I need to either do a curbside top-off, or even what are you just doing for yourself and for your team to keep your business safe while we're seeing, thankfully, the reduction of this COVID-19 spread. So think about your website. When's the last time it's been updated? Do you have all of your COVID messaging out there? Do you also have a message that says we welcome people, or we will see you promptly? Just think about, what does your website say about you? And I think one of the things maybe to consider is, is there someone that you can either hire or get to run your website for you? Because I think for most of you, you're just way too busy to do this yourselves. So one of the reasons why some offices, their website suffers is because the doctor's trying to do everything. So I would really encourage you to look at your website, and again, what is the message that it's projecting about you and your brand? Now, another thing that you'll notice with this particular office is that in the yellow area, this was the projections that the underwriters had when this office was getting ready to open. And we projected that they would bring in for the year about $400,000 in revenues. And that's, often more typical of a practice that's starting up, averaging about $33,000 a month in revenues or collections that are coming in. And you can see for this office, just July through December, they're averaging 165, and they're already doing over double what they were projected to do in a year's time. I think one of the key things I want to stress for all of you today is to think about your numbers and let your numbers be a roadmap to help you make great business decisions and to help kind of chart your course. So one of the keys to success is measuring and tracking benchmarks. And in the Milestone program, we track about 10 key performance indicators each month. And the reason why we keep it down to about 10 is that I find that if you track, I know a lot of you have software that will, give you 100 or 200 or 8,000 numbers each month, and honestly, it gets overwhelming, and your brain doesn't really know where to focus. So I would say, try to keep it simple so that you can take action on it each month. That also you can measure it each month. If it's too complicated, I find that it's not repeatable, and it's really a lot of times my philosophy in consulting over the years has been to help people develop systems that are simple and repeatable so that, everyone on the team can feel comfortable and can have a fantastic process that, you don't have to be extremely outgoing or extremely intelligent. You just have to develop something that is repeatable and is manageable with typical time management. So keep it simple and understand what the industry norm ranges are. So here is an example of, for example, production. You certainly want to track your production, but I would also encourage you to look at your production per day. And the reason why is Production per day is going to help you understand what's happening with your schedule. So for many offices, they want to look at their average production per day and just make sure that it's fairly balanced. There might be in your practice, for example, that you do the majority of your surgeries 2 days a week or something like that. So you're going to see spikes on those days in terms of production. But overall, it should average out if you are following a scheduling protocol. The other thing that you might track are some of your key income areas. This sample has laboratory, dentistry, and pharmacy. So again, looking at, there are healthy range norms for each of these. For example, laboratory is like 17% of your production. Dentistry used to be historically 2 to 3%, but now we're seeing it more at 5%. And pharmacy is typically around 22%. So you want I think it's great to know what the industry range norms are, but I think maybe more importantly, know what historically you've been doing and compare yourself against yourself. I worry less about what your neighbor is doing and more about like, where is your potential and how can you grow? So for example, if you think about your own practice and some of the income centers, and maybe you've noticed, maybe you can pull a year-over-year comparison, and you've noticed that there's a certain area like dentistry that has fallen or it used to be stronger. That's a great area to brainstorm and look at what training or what protocols need to be reinstated to get it back on track where it once was. The other thing here, revenues, obviously, as most practices have very little in receivables, so what you're producing and what you're collecting are typically the same. And again, new clients, for most established practices, that can be anywhere from 25 to 50. It really depends on how many active clients are in your base. The other thing it depends on is what type of medicine do you do? If you're someone who's doing, a lot of complex cases, you might need as many new clients each month because your per client revenue is going to be higher. Certainly you want to know what your overhead and your expenses are. And I get a lot of questions about this because I think, people get, maybe there's a lot of sharing that goes on about, getting your overhead low. And personally, my philosophy is not so much about that percentage-wise and how low can it be, because I think if you're having cash flow issues, the number one way that you can improve that is by increasing your production, not by cutting expenses. So if you've ever had a cash flow crisis, or if you've ever, find that you're having problems meeting payroll, really the area to focus on is less about expenses. Certainly if you've got a spending issue, that's a possibility, but most of the time when I'm working with a cash flow client, it's because there is a problem with case acceptance, with productivity, or they might be a startup practice and they're trying to be open 7 days a week instead of limiting their hours so that they can have better productivity, and they might be also able to moonlight on some of those off days. And then look at your profit and loss. And when I say profit and loss, it's not really the same as what your QuickBooks will produce as a profit and loss statement. A profit and loss statement is typically, a tax document that helps your accountant or your CPA prepare your practice to file taxes. So when I look at profit and loss, I'm really looking more at practice cash flow. What did you bring in for revenues? What went out with expenses? And then what is left over at the end of the month? Are you profitable? And I would also encourage you to think about, are you in a habit of putting aside an amount every month into a separate business savings account? I think it's important to always have a rainy day fund because there might come a time when you're going to need to dip into your savings, and when you have that small nest egg, you can really reduce your stress level. And like I said earlier, receivables typically aren't something that I see more than a few $1,000s in. Most offices will look at, if someone needs to extend their payment arrangements, they'll look into some vendors that can help them with that kind of financing. So please track your numbers. I'm sure that, I can talk about numbers all day long. I will tell you, honestly, I was not a numbers person. When I started my career as a consultant, my background was in marketing and in communication. And I never thought math was a strong suit, but I know that the more you learn about numbers, the more it tells a story, and the numbers really are exciting. And my hope for you is, if you're not a big numbers person, or if you find the numbers to be stressful or overwhelming, that we can find a way to make the numbers interesting and helpful, and really help provide you that sense of peace and that freedom. So let's talk about some other opportunities that you might have in your practice for things to look at, things that might, be improved or might need a fine tweaking. So marketing, we touched on that earlier with the example about the 2-doctor startup who had done such a great job on marketing. One of the things to look at, though, is make sure that you are marketing in yourself in a way that you're really taking care of your clients. And I think a lot of what marketing is for me, it's not so much about traditional advertising, which, by the way, as a lot of you know, doesn't always work well in healthcare, but it's basic things like, that website of yours, what message is it telling you about your practice? And the other thing I would say that's important about marketing is the basic of answering the phone when it rings. And you might think it's absurd that I say that, but I will tell you, in the course of a month, I will receive several calls or emails from clients saying, I think, if we just had a few more new clients, we'd be okay. And I call the office back and I think, really what we need to fix first is training you and your team on how to answer the phone. So when I call the office, I want to make sure that someone is happy that I've called the office. And so many times, without actually saying it, I get the impression that this office is extremely busy, or they're not thrilled that the phone rang. And I want to just challenge you to say, how can you ensure that the phone is answered by a live person every day? And one of the trends that has come out in the last couple of years is this concept called a virtual receptionist. So many of our startups will use a virtual receptionist because they might only start out with a couple of team members. And when they're closed on Tuesdays because they're moonlighting somewhere else, they still want the phone to be answered by a live person. So there are a bunch of vendors out there that would be happy to help you with either overflow calling or just helping you by answering the phone maybe early in the morning, helping you capture some of those people that are calling in with an emergency. It's one of the ways that, it makes more sense sometimes cash flow wise to have a virtual receptionist as an extended part of your team. It also helps, you in situations where you might have a key receptionist have to take a day off or, be out for, because of sickness or something, then you already have that backup built in. Scheduling is another system that you want to be looking at. And again, one of the places to start is just to make sure that you have templates for your team. And a lot of times what I will do is I'll just go back into the schedule and I'll say, let's pick out a couple of days that were good days. You produced well, but not, didn't need to be tens of thousands, but it was a good production day. It was a day where everyone got lunch. It was a day where you ended on time and you went home. You had a variety of procedures. Those types of things aren't flukes if you point them out and then you make them like a recipe for ourselves going forward. So anytime you're trying to improve your scheduling system, I would encourage you to first find some templates for yourself And if you don't have, if unfortunately, if there's no such thing as ever been a good day in your practice, then certainly there are some samples out there that, you know, I can help you find. Next thing I would encourage you to look at is your treatment presentation. And I think this is, again, a real opportunity if you're looking at improving the overall flow of things in your practice. One of the areas is to look at what your case acceptance is. Are people, you know, going with your recommendations? Maybe to start with, just to simply track when I present a treatment plan to a client, you know, what percentage of it is accepted? And is there any trend? Are there certain types of treatment plans that are accepted where others aren't? And I can tell you, when I've analyzed this with clients, usually what we find is the folks that, for example, are, you know, I see maybe that their dental numbers are strong. It's because they are really passionate about dental care, and they're educated about it, and you can just tell their voice lifts up when they talk about it. Those that don't sell much in terms of dental care, they don't really have much to tell me about it. You know, it's just doesn't, it's not really something that, you know, turns them on. So if you're not excited about something, try to make sure that there's someone on your team that is, because that can help balance out an opportunity. And just remember that when someone says no, I mean, they aren't saying no forever. They're just saying no for right now, or I don't really have enough information to figure out a solution to this. It's also been a real, you know, challenge to present treatment in sort of a distance environment. I think for some clients of mine, they've seen an improvement for treatment presentation, and others it's dropped down a bit. But, you know, the number one thing with treatment presentation is to simply start tracking it. Next opportunity that you have is financial arrangements. So do you have different ways to make the treatment affordable? Do you have payment options? There's so many different vendors out there that, you know, would help you make the treatment affordable, or make it possible for that client to pay over time. So, you know, I would just look at, you know, most of you will have an option like a third-party financing option. And I think where the opportunity might be is just that you're noticing you have this third-party option, but there's only like 2 people that have ever taken it or that are on it currently. And so it might be that you need to educate yourselves first about this plan and about the benefit of the plan. When I'm talking with team members, often I will, you know, they'll just tell me frankly that they don't think it's a good idea. And so then we have to go back and make sure that everyone understands the value and the benefit of a third-party financing option, what it could mean for that pet and for that client, that peace of mind, being able to get the ideal treatment versus, you know, declining treatment or having to go for a lesser option. Another opportunity that you have is in your recall, how you're pre-appointing your annual exams. And I would encourage all of you to help your clients make the next appointment, even if it's 6 or 12 months away. And I know that some of you are saying, you know, people don't know what they're doing 12 months from now. Sure, that's true. But most of us carry around a smartphone. And if you schedule it with me, I can put it in my phone, and I can always navigate it or, you know, adjust it as it gets closer. About a year ago, I was trying to make an appointment for my senior boy. I have 3 cats, Mr. Fluffy. And the thing that struck me as odd, I go to a great veterinary practice, feline only, and love my practice. But one of the things that was really frustrating for me is I was just trying to make a 6-month follow-up, and the front desk said, no, we can't really do that. We'll let you know. We just haven't made our staffing schedule yet. So look at that kind of situation and ask yourself, are you getting in the way of your own success? Because if you don't have your schedule set for 12 months from now, I would encourage you to think about getting that as a priority, because you're kind of getting in your own way of your own success. And the last thing I want to say here is that there's also an opportunity to look at your senior wellness program. I think most offices love the idea, but if you really start tracking the number of senior pets in your practice, as well as the number of senior pets that are really participating in a true wellness program, you'll see that there's some opportunity there to improve that. I want to show you another example, this one a little closer to home for you. That's a practice acquisition for a veterinarian in Wisconsin, and what this practice was able to do in, again, I get a lot of questions about how has it been for people when, I do work nationwide, so I do see things are somewhat different depending on what region of the country you're in. But even for this practice, one of the things I noticed that, this practice grew 10% during this, this crisis. So she took over ownership in July as well, and finished her milestone term in June. And you can see, still, on the goal would have been for her to collect about $92,000 a month, and instead she collected 101. And I looked a little closer at this one as well, and I said, was there something particularly odd or unusual or fantastic? And one of the things I did notice, and maybe you noticed this for yourself, when the pandemic hit in April, her expenses dropped. And the reason why her expenses dropped is, I think, just that feeling, that initial fear that most of us have, like, oh my gosh, the country is closing down, what am I going to do? So there was a drop in expenses, just a tightening up. But again, I think it was just more of a gut response. And as you can see, this top line, kind of this reddish line, production continued to grow in the upcoming months. Let's talk about some challenges. So one of the challenges that I think a lot of you have is staffing. Maybe not all of you, but I certainly know that there is a lot to celebrate, but there's also these areas of concerns. And the most common one I hear has to do with staffing and a perceived shortage of qualified team members. And I think, one of the clear things that has happened is it's really pointed out our childcare dilemma in our country, with kids doing school from home in many areas. Families, are having to make that difficult decision to figure out who's going to oversee learning and childcare. And I know in my case, my daughter's 13 now, so not as stressful for me, but I was imagining, if she was 4, what would that have looked like for me, and how would that be different? So I would just encourage you to think about that. Maybe you've already been through this. Maybe things are, I know schools around here are getting back to in-person, and I think in your areas, it might depend exactly on what school district you're in, but things are starting to improve a bit there. But I would also say that with this childcare dilemma, there are also plenty of people in your community who are looking for work, and what are you doing to let people know that you're willing to hire and you're willing to train? And I think it's one of the opportunities, again, when you're busy and you're feeling overwhelmed, maybe the last thing you want to think about is, what kind of training program can we implement so that we can take someone who's just got the right attitude and train them on some of the clinical things. But it really needs to be part of your culture. I think training is going to always be something that's needed, even in practices that are, that have had very little turnover and that have got, a highly astutely trained team. Training should be part of your culture, and it's something that you want to take some time out to focus on and do, just so you can stay on top of any changes that are happening. The second area that I've seen that's been a challenge is this area of client communication. And again, what I would say is that for some people, they did not have the technology, or maybe they have implemented the technology to fix that problem. They didn't have a two-way text system. They didn't have systems put in place so that they could stay in better communication with their clients. So with the new COVID protocols, curbside drop-off and telemedicine have become more common. And this might be something that you, again, want to look at and say, is this telemedicine might be here to stay. And is that something that we want to implement this year if we haven't already implemented it? And how do we establish and grow the relationship with our clients, with or without in-person visits? Do you have two-way communication via text? Do you use any kind of video chat? Those kinds of things. And then finally, the big challenge that I see is burnout. Honestly, there has been, a lot of, I think, just across the board, not just necessarily in the veterinary industry, but in all places of our country, a big mental health crisis, and really needing to, what I would encourage you to think about is, all the mental health challenges that COVID has brought about. How do we keep ourselves healthy? And what are the boundaries that you need to put in place so that you can provide excellent care? Are you taking any time off? Do you have a plan to keep your stress level manageable? I mean, one of the basic things is just making sure that you're doing some things like walking and drinking enough water, just, to keep the burnout level more manageable. So those are the biggest three challenges that I see. I know that there's terrific opportunity for all of you. I want to just stop for a little bit now and open it up for some Q&A and see if there are things that I can answer more in depth or help you out with.
A reminder to please just type your question in the Q&A area and I will help ask those. Give people just a second. I know some people are faster typers than others. Oh, I'm not getting any questions right now.
It may be Rob, if you can jump on the line. Rob, I know is in Minnesota, and if you can talk to me about some of the things that you're hearing from your local clients, some of the challenges or opportunities that you've had just locally there.
Yeah, hi Tamara, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. So yeah, I mean, I think you definitely hit on things that have and will continue to happen here in this neck of the woods. I mean, as you kind of mentioned with the startup example, I mean, through the pandemic, there's definitely been a lot of people that have ventured out and started practices. So just because there's a pandemic happening, that hasn't slowed down the growth of small business owners in the veterinary community, as well as you talk to some people in the transitioning world, there continues to be opportunities for ownership, right? You have doctors that are in their 8 days of retirement, so to speak, and what the pandemic has brought about with the level of business oversight has just kind of made them create a decision of, I think this is the year that I transition the practice and maybe step back from the managerial duties and try to sell my practice. So I think there have been a lot of opportunities that have arisen for younger DVMs on the call with becoming owners because of, again, the increased spending in the vet industry, as well as just the natural tendency of some older owners to now want to move on to that next stage in their career. I don't know. I've heard everything across the board, from curbside to some people going back to in-person visits, and it kind of really more depends on the preference of the practice owner, what they feel like might be a good opportunity to market themselves in their community to bring patients and clients back in together. And it's been it's been kind of all across the board. I mean, obviously you have some rural areas of Minnesota, outstate Wisconsin, outstate Minnesota. Those communities react a little differently to the pandemic versus here in the Twin Cities. But yeah, also the burnout, right? I mean, the burnout is a lot of people working a lot of hours, trying to keep up with demand, dealing with the clients, right? And the anxiety they have about their companion animals. I mean, there's definitely some of that happening too,
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. I think one of the things, it will depend obviously where you're at and what's happening in your county with the COVID cases. But if you can give your clients the opportunity for either in-person or curbside, if you have taken the time to just refine your protocols and you can offer both, I see that as a real positive message to put out there. That's really a good customized approach. Makes it trickier. I think it's easier. It's sort of like the hybrid model for schools, right? It's much trickier to do both. But there are some situations where either a client, there's something that just can't quite get communicated or explained as well when you take the pet in the carrier from the car into the office and the client is then on the phone or on a video chat trying to explain to you what she or he heard or what their concern is.
I still don't have any questions from the audience right now.
Okay. Well, I know, I think one of the things, again, just to think about is your own opportunities and your own peace of mind. So I guess what I would really say to that is you have to look at prioritizing and knowing that, if you are someone that is feeling overwhelmed right now, or you have a lot, maybe more business than you want, that still is a problem, maybe not as much of a problem as if you don't have the cash flow to support payroll or something like that. But I have worked with clients over the years, who might be in a situation where their facility is really small, or they just, they're feeling constrained. They would like to grow and they've got too much business. And I think, for some of you, you might be in that situation. There's still things that you can be doing to handle or to manage a busyness issue. And I guess one of the things to look at with busyness is to look at also how you're using your specialists and making sure that you're doing what you do best and that you're not, and I know sometimes you're maybe in a rural area where you have to do a little bit more of everything. But I think one of the things that can be very helpful and empowering is if you are doing the procedures and the types of appointments that you really feel like your skill set is in, and again, utilizing some of your other specialists, some of your other resources, and delegating well to the team and training that team so that every year the team has got things that they're getting trained on, continuing education that they're doing, so that you're not, as the doctor, you're not doing more than you really need to do, that you're really empowering everyone on your team to work at the highest level of their licensure.
Great point. We do have a question. If you are aware of if mobile veterinary practices have grown at the same rate as some of the conventional veterinary practices.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I have some offices that have a mobile component. So I don't have any that are just strictly mobile, because we finance brick and mortar buildings. But I would say that the growth for mobile vets has been huge. And as you know, or as you probably have experienced, that there is a certain segment of your community that does not feel comfortable going out. And I'm thinking of my friends that are a little bit older or who have medically compromised situations, and they're saying, I need to find someone who will come to me. So yes, I would say I don't have a statistic to give you, but I would say that it's probably at least up 8% if not up 15, because of that fear that people have about going out and not, and also just the desire to limit their exposure.
Great points. Do we have any
Hey.
additional questions? Oh, go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, no, I think if there's any other questions that pop in, stop me. But, Tamara, you had brought up a good point the other day that I didn't hear you say here about the challenge with staffing, but also how that could be on the same side an opportunity with what's happening in our communities with the kind of restaurant and bar and that, the hospitality industry, because if somebody out there, you were saying how if somebody out there needs staff and there's a shortage of CVTs, there's a shortage of assistants, right? There's a shortage of people that have great customer experience. There are waitresses and bartenders and hospitality workers that are great client-facing people that with the right coaching and training might want, a career shift into a different area. If they have a pet at home, they're passionate about companion animals. I mean, there are some opportunities out there to place ads to attract some really nice customer service candidates from these other industries that have experienced these kind of shutdowns, right?
Yeah, absolutely, great point. And I think of a couple of my friends who are, professional actors, and there's no Broadway show for them to be in right now. So, some of them they've had to pivot into all kinds of interesting things and doing things related to the pet industry, going into doing other, again, getting retrained on something else. I've got another friend who owns a dance studio, and they have not been able to reopen, and so she's tutoring kids as a way to pivot. But I know that there's a lot of these folks that are animal lovers, that are people types, outgoing personalities who would make terrific staff members for your practice, even if it's just to help with some of the overflow on some of those busier days.
Yeah, Nona is echoing that it's a great idea to utilize customer service individuals from other industries when they have a skill set that can be applicable, transferable.
Yeah, I think one of the mistakes that I see that sometimes new owners will make is that they'll have this feeling that they have to hire experienced team members. Like, I don't know the front desk, so I need to hire that receptionist who's been in the industry for 5 or 10 or 45 years. And the problem can be that you hire someone who's not particularly good with people, who's not customer focused, versus hiring someone who's just a positive personality, a can-do, maybe high energy individual that's going to help, just welcome those people into your practice. I've always heard that it's better to hire happy people than it is to hire experienced people, because you can train people on the systems. We all at one point in our lives, learned about veterinary medicine. We all went to school for different things and picked up the systems and the different protocols. So I think, a positive individual, you can't really train people to be happy, but you can train a happy person how to do, how to become a technician, or how to, answer your phone with enthusiasm.
Excellent. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay. Any other questions that we have? Comments? Suggestions?
I would just certainly welcome any follow-up questions, or if someone has a situation that sometimes is more private in nature and they feel like, this is not the forum to discuss my situation. I'm always willing and able to discuss, a practice situation with you one-on-one, if that would be helpful.
Thank you for offering that, Tamara. Greatly appreciate it.
Sure.
And I do have a question that did come in. This is an individual who's facilitated several practice management groups and have modified their clinic hours during the initial days of the pandemic. How do you foresee clinic hours modifying going forward?
Maybe just to clarify, modifying meaning reducing or having to expand. I think one of the things that you look at always is how the hours, sometimes people want to add days before analyzing how they're scheduling. And again, you're utilizing your team members to their fullest potentials and really overlapping the schedule so that you're not double booking, but at the same time, you're not in a situation where you're just, sometimes people will add more days and hours when really what they need to go back to is their scheduling protocols and looking at, you know, what is not happening there, or what could we improve in terms of maybe there's an issue with staying on time. So I think going forward, there's going to be increased demand. And I think modifying those hours, it kind of depends on in what regard you're saying. Modifying meaning expanding those hours, yes, but at the same time, that's not necessarily sustainable unless you add personnel. I want to be sensitive to the fact that some people are feeling burnt out right now. So for me, just to say to that solo doctor, you know, just you need to add another half day a week, that may not be the best solution. That's not the long-term plan. It may be in the interim, what they need to do is bring on another staff member, or, you know, eventually bring in another associate to help with the flow of things.
Yes, so she was indicated that she had to help clinics do both. Some had to limit their hours because of reduced staff, and others had to extend theirs to see more patients. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that that may still have to continue.
Yeah, and I think the whole staffing issue, that could be like an hour in and of itself, you know, what to do with those team members that don't feel comfortable returning, and at what point do you have to just, you know, move forward in terms of taking care of clients. And I think one of the things that everyone is learning at this time, because it hasn't been done before, is, you know, you might have learned how to furlough someone and how to bring them back. And now that the vaccines are being rolled out, you know, even how to handle that situation where an employee does not want to get vaccinated. You know, just again, those are situations that you just want to make sure that you're documenting really well, and that you're still following all your safety protocols. Because as we move forward, where there's less cases, it doesn't still mean that you can't get infected. So I would just encourage everyone to just stay mindful of that.
Great points. Do we have any other questions? Everybody's saying thank you very much. They enjoyed the information and you have inspired them. So,
well, thank you. And I just, again, I want to encourage you all to hang in there and just know that you're not alone, you know, and just, I think the number one thing that I could say is you've got to take care of yourself right now, and so that you can continue to help take care of other people and pets.
Great points. Thank you so much for your time, everybody who joined us today, and Tamara for your time and inspiring us. Thank you guys very much. Have a great day and stay safe.